Today is day 41 of my vlog. It's incredible to me that I've been able to keep this going that many days. Today we're going to look at In the Wilderness. The title is Encourage Your Leaders. Deuteronomy 1:38, which is a great verse that says, But Joshua the son of Nun, which standeth before thee, he shall go in thither, that is, into the promised land, encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Seems a little strange to me that God even has to tell his people to encourage their leaders. But by experience, I know that it's not something people do easily. God has led his people out of the world, out of Egypt, through the wilderness, into the wilderness, and they're about to leave the wilderness. He gives them obvious leaders, not obvious leaders, obvious leading. Deuteronomy 1:33, God says, I led you with a fiery pillar in the cloud. And you can't miss that. And yet people didn't follow God very easily either. And God's people often complained about following where God led them. They didn't encourage God very much. But Moses saw the cloud. He saw the leading plainly. And Joshua plainly saw where God was leading. And Joshua is God's replacement for Moses. Now you have to remember this. Moses had flaws. And because of his flaws, people decided not to encourage him. In fact, many times they tried to elevate themselves above him because of his flaws. That is so normal. I mean, Miriam and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, they had excuses and reasons. And Joshua had a very obvious flaw, one that's just glaring. He's afraid. 5 times God says to Joshua, be strong and have a good courage. Don't be afraid. That's Deuteronomy 31:6, 23, Joshua 1:6, 1:9, 1:18. That tells all of us something about leadership. Leadership is scary. It's hard. It's frightening. Out of every group of people God's leader has to lead, there's usually at least one or more out of every, say, 30 people who have an issue with the leader because of his flaws. And they would discourage the leader. And they do discourage the leader. Sometimes almost everybody has issues with the leader because of his flaws. I've thought about this. God's leaders are going to have flaws, and God knows it when he calls them to lead. So God tells Moses to tell the people, just before Moses leaves them and Joshua takes over, Moses is to say to the people, Joshua, the son of Nun, Deuteronomy 1:38, Joshua, the son of Nun, which standeth in front of you, before thee, you see him, you know his weaknesses, he shall go before thee. He shall go into the promised land, in thither. Encourage him, capital letters, encourage him, for he shall cause you, Israel, to inherit the promised land. God's leaders are the means where God gives you your heritage. Discouraging them isn't very smart. Joshua does for God's people what God had done for them in Deuteronomy 1:33. In 1:33, God said, I myself will go ahead of you and lead you. And in 1:38, God says, now Joshua is going to do it. What that's saying is this. To discourage Joshua is to hinder God. It would not be profitable for you to not encourage God's leaders, because you hinder God's when you don't. You hinder God's work when you don't encourage God's leaders. There are so many ways to discourage God's leader. And I believe there's only one way, as far as I can think of, to encourage him. The way to encourage him is let him lead. Submit to his leadership. That's not blind obedience, but let him lead and follow. Hebrews 13:17 says this, obey them that have the rule over you. Talking about pastors. And submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, so that you can inherit the promises. They go ahead of you. They lead the way. They are the person God has chosen to lead you to success. So obey them, because they must give an account for leading you. The responsibility is on them to lead. It's not on you to lead. And then it says that they may do it with joy and not with grief. See, if you discourage your leaders, you cause them grief. You not only hinder God, but it says this, it's unprofitable for you. That's Hebrews 13:17. So, many a Christian leader has been broken by followers who discourage them. It has never, ever been to the benefit of the follower any time in history to discourage a leader or to break him. The followers also take their grief that they've given to the leader, and it shows up in other areas of their lives. Usually the next area of their life. Deuteronomy 1:38 says this, encourage the leader. In our next vlog, we will be looking at how discouraging the leader, how discouraging Moses wounded Moses. Actually caused Moses to lose some of the blessings that God had for him. May God bless you today.